Okay, so let's say that after hearing all of that, and also hearing about us talk on other YouTube videos about the difficulties in doing it all independently yourself. Let's say that, all right, well then that isn't the way that I want to go. I want to design this, and I really want indie boards and cards to take it. What is the process for looking for a publisher in general, or with you guys, that would cause you to say yes, let's sign this game? Like, what's that process?
So, Indie Boards and Cards has a year-round open submission box. So basically, you can email in information about a game that you've designed, and then Indie Boards and Cards will look at it and they'll let you know if it's something they're interested in seeing more of or not. Generally, that involves having a sell sheet, which is sort of like a one-page marketing like pitch for your game. It's a little bit bigger than an elevator pitch. Generally, it has a little blurb about the concept of the game, like you're an orc fighting in a fantasy land to be the orc chieftain. Boom. Then a little blurb about how the game actually plays. In this game, players will be competing over dice to get the most to roll in order to earn some kind of victory point. And then also have pictures of components so that you get a sense of what the game looks like set up, and a little side blurb of like player count, amount of time it takes, components, general mechanics that it does, like worker placement or dice drafting, something that will be easily recognizable. And just from that sheet is what that you send in. A publisher can tell if they're interested or not interested based on the kind of games they're looking for. So I always say, because I get invited on stuff to talk mostly about my work doing acquisitions and receiving pitches from people, because obviously a lot of people who watch shows like this are prospective game designers who really want to know how to get their game picked up. So I've given this advice a lot, but it still bears repeating that every game company has a different audience that they cater to, or an audience that knows they like their games and will buy from them. So even if a game is really, really good, we might not be the company that will pick it up. It's not always a reflection of, does the company think your game is good or not? For instance, whenever I get an email with a sell sheet, it says 2 players, I immediately reject it, because we don't sell 2-player games. We don't have an audience of people who are looking for 2-player games, because we've never previously come out with 2-player games. So none of the people who say, man, we're really looking for 2-player games, really come to Indie Boards and Cards for that. So we also don't, if you come to us, you say, oh, I've got a great idea for a miniature game with it's a $300 big box, tons of miniatures games. We don't have that audience, and we also don't have the connections to make miniatures. That's the kind of thing that Simon could do a really great job with that game, and we couldn't. So there's a lot of criteria, internal criteria, that can change depending on maybe we just came out with a worker placement game, and so we're not trying to step on our own toes. We're like, nobody's going to want to buy a second one that's too similar to something we just came out with. So right now we're going to look for this kind of game instead. So that's the first step, the email. The second step, if you get past that with your sell sheet, it is something we're interested in. We think it seems like it has unique mechanics or could appeal to our audience. We'll either set up a meeting at a con, if there's one that's happening soon. For example, I spent a lot of today setting up meetings for Gen Con, which is next week. So we are meeting with a bunch of designers. We're going to sit down and get to see their game laid out on the table. They'll walk us through a couple of turns, and that'll give us a much better idea of the actual gameplay than the sell sheet did, so that we can tell if it's fun and if it seems like something we're interested in pursuing. If you're not coming to a con, or a con's not nearby, we also can set up a tabletop session, or not tabletop simulator, that's the name of it, a tabletop simulator session, play through a couple of rounds of your game, or if it can be sent in print and play mode, so that we can print out all of the components, cut them out, make our own prototype, play it internally, and then get back to you. So there's a couple of different things, but basically you should be prepared to somehow get the game to the publisher so that they can give it a try, get a real feeling for what the mechanics are like and the gameplay, and then they'll get back to you and see if it's something they want to produce or not. I feel like I've been talking for a while.
So that's right. So there are 2 rounds. First is your sell sheet email. If you get past that, then you've got this hopefully in person, but possibly over the internet play of the game, and then that's when the decision will be made, yay or nay.
Yes, that should be pretty much when the decision is made. Obviously, there are always different cases. So sometimes what we'll say, we'll come back to you after playing your prototype and be like, oh man, we want to like this, but there's this one thing that's bugging us, or, well, this is a really interesting mechanic, but the game is just too long. We don't come out with games that play for 3 hours. How can we, can you take it back, fix this, and then come back to us with it, and we'll sign it for you if you can fix these issues. Or sometimes there's stuff like we're going to sign it, but we're going to develop it internally and change a larger amount of aspects about the game than we normally do. We're like, we are going to do this work. And then sometimes in the course of doing that work, we could spend months and months or a year trying to develop the game. It never quite does what we want it to, and eventually the rights might revert back to the designer if we have that discussion with them and we say, actually, this isn't going to work out. But those are the minority of cases. Generally, once you get to playing, you get the yay or nay, and the game gets signed by the company, and then will get produced in around a year or so.
What is the success rate like? How many email proposals do you get? How many do you take to round 2 versus how many are actually signed?
You're going to make me be really discouraging.
Oh, well, that's okay. One of the things we do here is an honest look at things, because whether you're on the business side or you're trying to do the independent or you're trying to publish, it's not discouraging, which is an honest look.
I get a lot of emails about games, maybe 5 a day, wow. Which is a lot. And they build up because I'm also doing full-time work and all those other things I told you I was doing. So I'll go through them and in a big chunk, and I'll go through like 50 and turn around maybe it depends. If a con is coming up soon, we know we have that time to sit down with people at the con, which means there's a lower barrier to entry. If I'm with flippy floppy on a game, it's like, oh, it could be good, it could be not good, but I'm at the con already. Might as well make an appointment. I'm going to be there. It's not a drain on our time. If you're just saying, oh, I'll send you a print and play, now it's cutting into our actual office time that we're using to develop other games. So generally, for those ones, if it's a con, maybe 5 to 8 out of 50, I will send an email back to. If it's not con time, maybe 2 out of 50, I will send an email back to, because we have to be really selective with the games that are interest us. And then from those, usually we'll take 2 prototypes from a con. Sometimes we'll take no prototypes from a con. Sometimes we'll take 5 prototypes from a con. It depends. But I would say it's a very low percentage, especially nowadays, because we do sign fewer games from independent designers than we used to, with COVID and the increase in production costs and shipping costs and everything costs in the world these days. The games has always been super slim. You do not make much money off of a board game versus the amount it costs to produce it. And now prices of everything it costs to produce and ship it have gone way up. So the margins are even slimmer. So anything that's signed from an external designer is a risk, and it's like a less and less potentially good risk the higher the cost of producing it go up. So we are even more selective with the games that we produce these days.